Hi, Josh. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk a little bit about your research.
Good morning.
First, I would love for you to start by telling us a little bit about your personal and educational background.
Wow. Okay. Um, so, okay. I was a pastor for 20 years. I went to undergrad and then I went directly into seminary and was a pastor for many years. Got my master's degree in sociology, oh my God, 15 years ago. And so I've kind of taught and worked in the church. Also, I'm in recovery. So that I've been in recovery for it'll be 10 years in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a good milestone. So prior to COVID, I spent a few years doing spiritual direction and counseling for people in recovery, mostly LGBTQ people. And then in 2021, I went back to school to finish my education to get my PhD in sociology, where I study population health, substance use, and mental health.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your research? Like, what does your dissertation proposal look like? What are your areas that you're really interested in learning more about?
Sure. So it was it's for anyone who's never gotten a PhD, figuring out a dissertation topic is a nightmare, especially if you do quantitative work, because I had to find a data set that matched the things I wanted to do, which I did. It's called the National Longitudinal Survey of Adolescent to Adult Health. Short version is AdHealth. And what I'm looking at is the great thing about that data set is that it's longitudinal, which means that it covers from the life of people from 1994 until right now, 2016. They're working on wave six right now. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the religious behaviors of adolescents aged 12 to 18 in the 90s, and I'm looking at their religious behavior and how that influenced substance use. So, for example, are people who are more religious, are they more likely or less likely to get involved with drugs? And we know from the research that people who are religious are less likely to engage in substance use, but we don't know as much about queer youth and how religion affects them, because as most people probably know, a lot of people in our community have had struggles with religion. Religion has been problematic and may send people into drug use as opposed to save them from it. So I'm specifically looking at gay and lesbian youth, adolescents from the 90s on, seeing how their religious behavior affected their substance use. For example, if a kid was an evangelical, or his parents or her parents were evangelical, were they more likely to use drugs, or were they less likely to use drugs? A kid in a progressive church, right? Are they more likely to be okay with who they are? And so what I'm looking at is minority stressors, internalized homophobia, questions that ask things like, if you could be straight, would you? If you
Mm.
would change one thing about yourself, would it be your sexual orientation, right? Do you think that God does not love you? Questions like that measure the extent to which a person feels shame or guilt about being a sexual minority. So that was a lot of information in a short span of time. That kind of gives you an idea of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's easy to see the connection between your past experiences and why you're choosing this research topic. But is there any more information you may want to provide to those that are watching this on why you chose this topic and why you feel that this area is so important to gain knowledge in?
Absolutely. So, the research is pretty clear that people who are sexual minorities, and that includes all sorts of people, non binary people, people who identify as gay or lesbian or trans or queer or questioning or intersex or asexual, right? Anything that's not the majority heterosexual population. They're more likely to have mental health problems. They're more likely to die at younger ages, even though, for example, gay men make more money than straight men, but they're more likely to die younger, more likely to have cardiovascular disease, more likely to commit suicide, even though they have more money, which shows that people with more money generally more healthy. But because
Yeah.
of minority stressors that they experience in their life, they have more health problems. This is especially true for people who are younger. We tend to think, oh, we're in 2024, there are gay straight alliances, things are different. And yeah, things are different than it was 30 years ago when I graduated from high school. But it's a fallacy to believe that everything's fine, because people who are sexual minorities are still killing themselves at record rates. I mean, this and using drugs because of the fact that they feel shame because of who they are. So yeah, if you live in a city, you might be more likely to see gay kids in your school and be cool with that. But when you live in rural areas or maybe more conservative towns, that's not the way it is. So we need to realize that there's a serious problem. It's not gone just because time has passed and people can get married. That's just legal stuff. The social equality is still a long way off.
Right, and that religion plays such potentially a huge role in those relationships and feelings of self-worth and identity as well. Right.
Absolutely. And when you look, I mean, for example, for same sex marriage, the biggest obstacle to that, for like Prop 8 in California, the biggest obstacle to our rights has been religious groups
Hmm.
and people who understand the Bible to be condemning of who we are, which, of course, it's not if you ask a lot of us who see it differently, but still millions of people find that we are somehow wrong. So that has not gone away, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. But we need to engage, not fighting, right, or yelling at each other, or that's what this means, this what that means. What I learned is being a pastor for 20 years and working on sexuality and equality is that we have to speak their language. Come to them, meet them where they are, talk their language, talk about the Bible, talk about the reasons why we are more than what they see us as, right? We're more than just a sexual behavior. And this is going to help do that. I really believe that. It's going to help get underneath why people feel the way they feel and what we can do maybe to change it, because policy is non-existent, especially when it comes to kids. And if anything, right now, we're in an era of the Republican Party trying to really screw over transgender kids. So it's more important now than ever to understand that people are human. They're not just some sort of political football they can kick around and try and get votes for.
Yeah. So speaking, in this topic area, what is some recent research that you've read that really just, blew your mind or, really made you want to go specifically into this area that you think really added to your dissertation topic or to this field?
That's a good. There is a lot of great stuff out there. I'm gonna do kind of probably something that isn't nice because I'm not really gonna shout out to anyone particular other than my mentor Shannon Monnet, who's the best mentor that we can have. My concern about this is that there isn't any
Mm,
research. This is going to really be, as far as I know, people can correct me. I did dive into the literature. If it's out there, please show me. I have yet to find something like this that looks over 2 decades of the life course that's longitudinal, that looks at several religious measures. Like I'm looking at people like two forms of religion, right? I'm looking at public religiosity and private religiosity. So public religiosity is when, what do you identify as? Are you a Christian? If you are a Christian, are you Catholic? Are you evangelical? Are you Lutheran? All that stuff. How often do you go to church? Do you go to youth groups and Bible camps? And are you a member of the choir? So that's all the public stuff. Then the private stuff is, what do you believe the Bible is? Do you believe it's the inerrant word of God, or you believe that it's a historical book that, may have some stuff in it that's outdated?
mhm.
Do you believe that God loves you? When you make decisions in your life, how important is religion? So I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at all these different measures, and there really aren't any studies that incorporates all of those measures, right? That looks over the course of 20 years from the ages of like 12 to 40, and that, oh my goodness, I lost my train of thought. Oh, oh my God. See, I knew when that video would turn on, I'd forget something. Oh, right. Okay, I remembered. So most of the studies out there look at alcohol and marijuana, or they look at illicit substances. They tend to not look at all three together. So I'm actually studying alcohol use, marijuana use, and illicit drug use, because in my opinion, there's a big difference between smoking weed and shooting heroin. And there's a difference between maybe binge drinking in college versus having an addiction to fentanyl. So we need to look at those three substances together in one study, but also separate them out, because those are very different behaviors, even though they're all kind of smushed together under the category of substance use, but they're very different. So it's a big study. So
Yeah.
it's the lack of what's out there that worries me, which is why I'm doing it this way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for, looking into this research topic and adding to this area so that, more individuals can be seen and represented in the world of sociology and social sciences more broadly. I think that that's really exciting. And I'm glad that you're able to do it with us at Syracuse and the Lerner Center.
Me too. I love it. I love it.
So to wrap things up, I just have kind of a more fun question for you. What is one of your either favorite book or podcasts or movies that you're
Oh,
recently, watching or engaging with, and you're not allowed to say Schitt's Creek?
I know. Oh God, yeah. All right. So for anyone watching, her and I are very close friends, and I'm obsessed with that show. It's my background noise when I work, so I've seen it hundreds of times. I just okay. So I last night I binged the second half of Bridgerton, which was just released last week, which I absolutely love, and that was fantastic. So I love that. Love Interview with the Vampire. I'm a big vampire fan. I read Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire when I was very young, and that kind of hooked me to the vampire genre and horror. So any book about that, like Stephen King's Jerusalem Lot, that's good stuff.
Yes.
That's
And
what
are
I love.
you still a big fan of a hashtag sisters-in-law, or is there another podcast that has recently stolen your heart?
No, Sisters-in-Law is my favorite thing in the world. I do listen to Morning Joe every day too.
Hmm.
For they have a 4 hour show on MSNBC, but I listen to their first hour on a podcast. So yeah,
Well, shout out to hashtag sisters-in-law. It's a great podcast. Always learning something new.
yeah, they're the best.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It was lovely just learning more about your research, and I hope other people can benefit from learning more about what you're doing too.
Thank you, Alex. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Bye, Josh.
Bye.